Hey, welcome to my new home. Sorry you caught me at a bit of a bad time, it's not quite done yet, but I just wanted to show it off because frankly none of this would have been possible without you guys supporting me. Sorry, it's not that. Let me move the camera over. This is my new place. I still need to figure out how to weatherproof it, but I get to see the stars at night, even though sometimes they are a little bit wet. But hey, rent is cheap, and home is where you lie down and game at the end of the day and also make silly YouTube videos. At least, that's what it says on the sign. It's a bit hard to game in the back of this thing, but thankfully I have my Switch 1, and with this thing I can play Animal Crossing, and dream of someday having a real roof. Animal Crossing has seen quite a few different iterations throughout the years, but the core gameplay has always been kind of the exact same, barring some silly spin-offs. You can befriend your neighbors, go fishing, fill out the museum's collection, but the real main questline of the game is to get yourself a big ol' house. It's all about building that sweet generational wealth with the acquisition of property, my guy. Everyone comes to your town or island seeking it, and we all want a piece of that pie. Pay off your mortgage and then get a reverse mortgage so you can leave your descendants with nothing while you squander your money on a hobby you don't find engaging anymore, or just wasting it on scams. Now, in relation to the game, a lot of people have speculated on whether or not Tom Nook is a good person, Tanuki, whether or not he's pure of heart. I don't care about his scam charity that he hides money in or the dubious nature of him creating his own sovereign state in the middle of the ocean. What I'm concerned with today is that this fellow is at best completely incompetent when it comes to construction, or more likely is ripping you off because you don't know any better, and because you don't really have any other options. When it comes to discussing home prices in the game, you can figure out how much a bell is worth in real life currency, and some people have, but none of that really matters for what I'm going to be talking about today. Everything I'm looking at is comparative pricing, so whether you're looking at it in bells, dollars, or neopoints, at the end of the day, it's going to paint the same picture. The price of remodeling presented to you by Tom Nook and his methods of construction are an absolute ripoff. Let's start at the beginning of New Horizons specifically. I'm going to address the other games, probably, maybe, but I'm most focused on New Horizons because that's the one I've been playing the most recently. And where do we begin? In a tent. It's a simpler time. But that gets old, and where am I supposed to plug in my Wii U? So you say goodbye to nature and bam, you're a homeowner now. I'm a homeowner now. Virtually, of course, as that is the only way that I exist. I'll be quiet, this is one of my favorites. You get your first house for 98,000 bells. Seems like a good price, right? I guess. I mean, what other choice do you really have? So you owe almost 100 grand, but Nook tells you, you know what, don't sweat it. Pay it back whenever. Incredible. See, here's the thing about mortgages. They make homeownership a reality for most people buying a house. A lot of people can't afford a house in the first place, but think of how many less can afford it outright if they had to buy it all in cash at once. Mortgages also, through the nature of interest on an incredibly large principal, mean that if you have a 30-year mortgage, depending on your interest rate and initial down payment, you're going to be paying about twice the cost of the house in total. So Tom Nook waiving all that interest money is a life changer, right? Maybe. Let's not miss the forest for the incredibly picturesque trees. Let's get some context and start at the very beginning. Let's talk a bit about the construction process for new homes first. And this is specifically coming from an American perspective, specifically Midwestern perspective, so maybe the most average American. I know building practices are different across all parts of the world, and I just want to say first, I love each and every one of my non-American viewers. Not all equally, but I do love you all. In the Midwest, we're simple folks. We like to start building our houses from the ground up. Call me old-fashioned, I just think that's the right way to do it. Now, the first red flag to me in this brand new Nook home is that there's no basement. There could be a lot of good reasons to not have a basement. Maybe where you live, there's only a thin layer of topsoil before you hit rock, and the cost of excavating to dig down would not be cost effective. Maybe you live somewhere that the water table is really high, and digging down, you'd have a basement below that level, which would immediately leave you incredibly susceptible to moisture or flooding. Seems like that's probably the case here, given the fact that if you terraform and just dig down a bit, water seems to be only a few centimeters below the surface, so I don't blame Nook for deciding he wouldn't build any basements. If you do live somewhere that has a lot of soil that goes deep below the surface, you can fairly easily excavate with heavy machinery, and then start building your typical foundation. The kind of basement construction I see involves pouring the initial foundation, then framing walls to pour concrete into. Your joists, which will support your your first floor will then be set on top of these. At the center of the joists, you'll typically have a larger main support. In older houses, it was just a physically larger piece of timber, though later construction would switch to this being a large steel I-beam. I think this main support started switching to steel around probably the 60s or 70s, but that's a rough personal observation from being in a lot of people's basements. You never know. While you're watching this very video, I might be in your basement. If anyone has any recommendations on books surrounding the history of residential construction, whether it's in America or any country, please let me know, because this will not be the last time I discuss it, and it'd be fun to be better educated when I bring it up again in a couple weeks. On top of the joists going across the basement, you can place your subfloor, and boom, you're back on ground level. From here, you start framing the actual house. You put up stud walls and start to build out the actual shape of individual rooms. Depending on how many stories your house is, you may sort of repeat steps here. If you're going up more floors, you'll continue to build up joists and framing on top of them, but if you're just building a ranch or single-story home, you'll build trusses or the framing of the roof next. Once you've got a roof and walls on your house, you can start to actually flesh out the inside. This is aptly referred to as the rough-in period, because you're getting it all in, but it's gonna be rough. Here you're gonna have your trades of plumbing, electrical, and mechanical come in. Then, lastly, you'll have your finishing trades. These are gonna be your drywallers, painters, all the last steps that make your house look like a house and not a weird skeletal jungle gym. Now you may be thinking, is any of this relevant? What does this have to do with anything? Nintendo is a Japanese company. Maybe they base the houses off of Japanese construction. To which I'd say, I'm playing the American version of the game. That's why they all speak American. Also, that's why there's an eagle on my island, so I think it's pretty relevant. What I'm trying to illustrate is that there are a lot of steps involved, even when you're just making a big old box of a house. When you do this, you want to make sure you're going to do it right. The first house you get built is a 6x6 grid house. To help illustrate this, I'm going to design some simple models of the houses, and here you can see the layout of the first house. It's really simple. There's not much to it. Here next to it we have the first upgraded house. Not a huge difference, right? Just slightly larger. Well, your first house is 36 squares. This first house costs 98,000 bells to construct, meaning it cost about 2,722 bells per square. But then when you upgrade it, it costs 198,000 bells to convert your house to be an 8x8 grid. In total, then you have 64 squares, which is a pretty substantial increase in total overall space. With this increase now though, your house costs about 3,094 bells per square. Except that math is ignoring the initial 98,000, so it really in total is 296,000 bells to construct this 8x8 home, which is actually 4,625 bells per square. This first upgrade raises the cost per square by almost 70%. Note, I didn't say it increases the value by 70%, just that the cost to create your home went up by that much. Interestingly enough, if you look at how much space it increased by though, it actually got 78% bigger. Maybe this isn't a big deal. 78 is bigger than 70, I think. You came out ahead. Sure, you did, in sheer square footage, but that's not really how buildings work. Now, this is why I got the models. So your square footage increased by 78%. This footprint of your building, that's bigger. But the total materials to go from 36 to 64 squares is not 1-to-1. Sure, the flooring and foundation will be a significant increase, as well as the additional roofing and joists to support it, but the framing and finishing of the walls only increases your materials used by about 1/3. So you should be able to make up some ground there. Except, increasing the size of a house in this manner is never, ever going to make sense, and that's probably why it costs so much. When I look at the numbers this way, it actually kind of makes sense why it's so much more expensive, despite it overall not feeling that much bigger. And that's because expanding a single room in a house is just way more work than simply adding another room. Think about it. To get this additional space and keep the house square, you're gonna have to remove at least 2 of these walls. Realistically, with keeping the door where it is, you'd have to move 3 of them, but let's simplify it for the sake of discussion. Then you can add an additional foundation and frame in extensions to each of these walls. And I can't say I've ever heard of someone doing an extension like this to their home, which isn't to say it hasn't been done before, but it just really doesn't make any sense. The real place that all this extra money would be racked up in is having to pull all your major trades again to adjust where plumbing, electrical, and mechanical are. Not to mention, you'd still have to sister in new joists and entirely redo the roof, so as it stands, the price isn't necessarily unrealistic as much as it's just a really dumb way to go about things. No matter how you cut it, my mind is left wondering why anything would be done this way. With the original cost of construction per square, you could have just started with an 8x8 house for 174,298 bells, which is less than the cost to upgrade. You ever notice how Nook never gives you an invoice? There is no breakdown of what his costs are, no explanation of work completed. He just sends out a crew in the middle of the night to dismantle and reassemble your house mildly bigger. Don't worry though, it gets worse, trust me. Once you've finally paid off your deluxe studio apartment, you might be thinking, okay, it would be nice to have some more space to stretch out. Maybe I could get a second room to put the toilet in so it isn't right next to my bed in the fridge. You head down to Lord of the Land Tom Nook and you say, hey buddy, remember how you built my house, that original 6x6? How about you construct that same room, but like again, right next to the big room? And he's gonna tell you, yeah, sure, that'll be no problem. How about 348,000 bells? Really? Really, dude? Okay. I guess that's why we didn't go down this route to begin with, because somehow it's more expensive to build an addition than to expand an entire house. Adding on a room to a house is actually not that crazy. I see it relatively often with older houses. The big reason this makes more sense than anything else is in terms of expanding your house, you're really not changing that much of the pre-existing structure. The brunt of the work is going to be removing siding and then possibly some additional framework, but if you did it on the side of the house that already had an exterior door, you don't even need to reframe that. And I've seen plenty of houses that have windows where they just leave them in between the rooms, which is a little bit silly, but your alternative is to just drywall over the windows, which is equally silly. Beyond that, you just need to construct that additional room, laying down the foundation, framing it up, and then extending the roof. There is zero reason why it should cost this much more, and even less for it to cost more the next 2 times you do it. This video game about talking animals is completely unrealistic. But that is my actual beef with it. It doesn't make sense within the context of the game unless Nook is truly ripping you off. You're telling me when I add on a room to the right side of my house, it costs 410,000 more bells than adding the exact same room to the back of my house. Why? Like literally why? Oh, because it's a video game? Next you're gonna tell me that Stitches isn't real and I've been mailing him letters telling him how much I appreciate him for nothing. I don't care if it's not real, it's real to me. And I would think that after 2 decades, Nintendo could figure out a system that feels a bit more logical, but whatever. After 4 upgrades, you've got a fairly bizarrely laid out house that cost you a grand total of 1,950,000 bells, or 11,337 bells per square. Yeesh. It's a bit of a step up from that initial price point. You also kind of have an ineffectively designed home. Here's a mock-up of what this house would look like if it didn't exist in some sort of pocket dimension. Although I guess this isn't accurate either, because inside these houses we have these weird hallways that truly make no sense. I guess the idea is that this way you can't see what the other room looks like, but really it's just this sort of weird, creepy, lost woods dark void that exists in your house. The reason you don't see a lot of houses designed like this is that it's just a plain wasteful design. It's neat, I like it, but it's very inefficient. The reason homes are generally built as squares or rectangles is because it's just a smart way to build. If you're looking to save on materials and time, both of which directly equate to money and cost for the consumer, when you introduce all these small angles, you're gradually increasing the surface area of the exterior without increasing the interior space at all. It's also going to increase the amount of labor involved, as this is more complicated, meaning you're going to have more people power and certainly more supervision, as people will improperly follow the blueprints if someone isn't keeping an eye on things and helping run the ship. If you design a house with more square footage that is just an outright box, you'll need a decent bit less framing, siding, and insulation overall. I'm not going to say one is strictly better than the other, and frankly, I like a house with some character, so I'm not saying that this design is bad, it's just not efficient or cost effective. The other aspect of inefficiency is that you'd have a harder time heating and cooling this place. More surface area on the walls means you're going to have more space for potential heat transfer, and in the olden days when heating things was a lot harder and winters could wipe out your whole family, this was pretty dang important. But in the modern era, all I'm left thinking is that all these minor cost increases do not excuse this total cost Nook charges for the first floor. I mean, it's clear he had to piece it all together bit by bit because he knew it would be outrageous to try and charge you over $1 million all at once. Oh wait, what's that? Oh, he's offering to build a second floor for how much? Listen up. When you're building your dream house in the future, and yes, that'll happen, I'm manifesting it for you. If you want it to be multiple stories, build it that way, from the start. You're gonna save yourself a heck of a lot of headache and wasted money. If you think taking down walls is hard, this makes that look like nothing. You're gonna have to first remove the roof, which could mean disassembling the whole thing, or maybe you could detach it and hoist it off with a crane, but either way, it's gonna be incredibly time intensive and expensive, because cranes aren't cheap, I guess. Then you need to ensure that the existing foundation and framing of the house are strong enough to support adding another floor, which is going to take a structural engineer and potentially more work to reinforce anything that isn't strong enough. Then you have to consider where you're going to put your stairs. Are you going to lose space inside the house or just add them sort of floating in front of it? All the labor involved, not to mention the headache of not being able to live in your house. There could also be zoning concerns, but I guess that's the perk of living on a lawless island and having crews that build in the cover of darkness. The price for this expansion is... it's whatever. From everything I've seen of people talking about building second floors onto their houses, it's insanely expensive. I don't really think Nook is giving you a great deal here, but there's never a good deal when it comes to an addition like this. Most people, when they need a bigger house, are gonna buy a different house, as long as they can afford it. The value of your house will not increase proportionally to how much it costs for you to make this addition either. But at least we have all the upgrades though. We're done, right? There isn't anything else you could possibly add to this house. If you wanted anything else, it would have just had to be a different house, right? No? Okay, there's one more thing. Yeah, really, Nook? Okay. Now that there's no more agenda of procuring my business, you finally tell me about building the basement. Gotta get that last little payday in, right? And by little payday, I mean 2.5 million bells? There would have been 100 better points to build a basement for this house. I think the most appropriate time would have been before you built the house, but it sure isn't after you build the second floor. The immediate challenge is probably obvious to you. There's a house in the way of trying to build this basement. The first question you have to consider is what kind of foundation you have. If you have a post and beam or perimeter foundation, you're off to a better start. But if you have a slab foundation, good freaking luck. Slab foundations are built on a large concrete slab, and sometimes they have utilities embedded in them. I've been inside houses before that are total guts that have the slab foundation exposed, and you can see just how awful trying to break them up and change anything would be. And if you're trying to build an entire basement under something like that, your best bet is probably just to slide the house over and then destroy the previous foundation to dig out and build an entirely new one. Maybe this house is built on a beam and post foundation though, so you have a small crawl space under there to get started. You're still going to have a ton of dirt to move, or rather several tons, and you're going to struggle to get any of your materials or equipment in at first because there's a whole house on top of it. But nightmare construction scenario aside, after all is said and done, you will have spent 5,696,000 bells on building this house for a total of 292 squares. What's that math out to? Something like 19,507 bells per square. It's hard to say how much this would have cost to build all at once, as building the second floor and basement are more complicated than just building things on the ground floor, but I think it's inarguable that if you built this whole thing at once, you would have gotten a better deal. It also would have made a lot more sense. The first Animal Crossing game actually has you build the basement before the upstairs, so theoretically in that one you could have slid the house over, but I don't know how feasible that would be with a 2-story. I also don't get why the series switched it up after that to being basement last, from pretty much every entry after the first one. It's just illogical, which I'll admit, does bother me a little bit. Either you're just getting ripped off by Tom Nook, who is a complete con artist, or Nintendo failed to innovate their series in over a decade. And frankly, I have to say, I think it's the latter, if I'm being honest. Don't get me wrong, I love a lot of Nintendo games. I love this Nintendo game. Played most of the Animal Crossing games, and I've liked them all. But I can't help but feel like I'm sort of playing the same game over and over again. Why not change it up once in a while? I think there's a few game-friendly ways that you could switch things up to make this whole ordeal even more logical and immersive, which is kind of the point of a cozy game. You're supposed to get invested in the world and feel like you're a part of it. Let me propose an idea. Maybe when you're looking to have a bigger house, you could just move. Moving would give a villager a chance to move into your old house, and your island could have more diversity in terms of different housing sizes on it. Villagers could have a variety of decor as they have different versions of what their house looks like, if it's just one room or two, or if it has a basement. Or here, different idea. You could build a house with a basement to begin with, but since you're on an island, it floods. It's roped off or boarded up, and you can't immediately use it, but you can work towards saving up or hitting some sort of island goal that finally leads to it being cleaned up. Maybe you have a sump pump installed or a gutter system fixed around your house, something to prevent the flooding. You could just try it, and if people don't like it, do something else with the next one. Look, I know I'm asking for logic in a place where it has no home. Furniture magically fits in your pocket, and when I change my wallpaper, which happens instantaneously, the entire shape of my windows can change, or they'll just disappear. And don't get me started on the exterior renovations. You're telling me that I can change the entire shape of my house for a few thousand bells, and that shape can be completely illogical to the construction of the interior. Sure, why not? It's not like I'm gonna stop having fun playing the game, but there's nothing wrong with innovating and trying new things and expecting new things from a game series that just kind of does the same thing over and over again. And it's good to learn when someone is just outright ripping you off, or when something's not worth spending the money on. Maybe Nook gives you the option to upgrade your house if you want to stay put, but also gives you the option to move if you'd like to save some more money. One has a little bit more inconvenience, but saves you bells in the long run. It's just an idea though. At the end of the day, if this is something that doesn't bother you about the game, that's fine. It doesn't stop me from enjoying it either, and I'm not saying that it should. It's really just an experiment in thinking about housing and pricing and what is and isn't a good deal. Either way, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate it, and I had a lot of fun making this one. It's actually the first time I think I've repeated really talking about a game on this channel, as I did a different Animal Crossing video a while back, really kind of over exploring the camera, so click on wherever it is if you're interested in watching that one. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe check out a different video about housing, or maybe go outside. That could be good too. Anyways, I had to record this whole thing twice because my footage didn't save, so thanks for watching. Have a good one.